In a strategic turn of events, the United States and Iran reached a memorandum of understanding, an MoU, indicating they will have a ceasefire for 60 days during which they will discuss the Iranian nuclear program. In the meantime, Hezbollah keeps targeting Israeli soldiers, IDF soldiers inside Lebanon, killing 5 of them only this weekend. Vice President Vance is speaking in very harsh terms against Israel, leading us into a perfect storm. Hello everyone, I'm Ofir Dayan. I'm a researcher here at the INSS focusing on anti-Semitism and delegitimization of Israel. In this episode of Brief.IL, I'll be sitting down with Tamir Hayman, the head of the Institute for National Security Studies and former head of Israeli military intelligence. This is Brief.IL. Let's begin. First, we want to open with the sad news we have received over the weekend. 5 soldiers who died during their mission in Lebanon. Nir Ben-Ari, Yoav Klein, Neve Chabshush, Yoav Kababia, and Dor Gdalia Ben Simchon. IDF soldiers and officers who died in battle in Lebanon. And we will further address these incidents in which they died later on in this podcast. But first, I think it is very important to send our heartfelt condolences to their family and to their friends before we're starting our conversation.
I totally agree, and 4 of them are members on the tank crew of the commander of the battalion. Personally, as one who served as a battalion commander, and previously when I was a junior soldier, I served in one of those commanders of battalion commanders' tank. I feel somehow personally involved, and it's really a sad story and reflects the importance of discussing what happens right now in Lebanon. So we will unwrap it soon, I think.
Yeah, we'll touch on that later on in our podcast. But first, let's look at the bigger picture, because what is happening in Lebanon is very related to what is happening in Iran. And the most notable development in the last several days is the Memorandum of Understanding, MoU, that has been signed between the United States and Iran electronically. Now they're convening in Europe. It's not a full agreement. It's a ceasefire, 60-day ceasefire, in which they're supposed to discuss other issues that are not addressed in the MoU. And I want to discuss with you 3 main aspects of the war in Iran that Israel was very concerned about, and maybe you can help us decode where we stand in terms of these 3 things with the MoU. So obviously it's the nuclear program, then the ballistic missiles program, and the proxies. Where do we stand on each of these 3 things?
And the regime.
And the regime, of course, okay. Which declaratively was not a goal of this operation.
Yeah, it is. It clearly was not a formal goal of the operation, but it hovers above it, as we have discussed it earlier in our podcast. Although it was not a mission, everybody hoped that after the successes in Venezuela and others, pretty remarkable successes of this couple of Netanyahu and Trump succeeding on retrieving all of the hostages on one day, leaving hostages in one day, it seems like they can achieve anything. And that created a sense of hopes that covered strategy. So as for the regime, let's start with that. That MoU, if it's not a ploy, there's a small chance, considering the fact that Iran receives all of its bucket lists, basically. If you are going all through the sections of this MoU, it seems like someone came with a magical wand and just gave them whatever they hope to achieve. So if it's not a huge ploy and we are going to face a renewed operation soon, this regime received a confirmation of legitimacy from the most powerful superpower that rejected it. That regime is legitimized by President Trump and ensures its survival. And that's very important because it reflects and echoes to the masses, to the population, to the potential resistance energy in Iran domestically.
So the help is on the way, is no longer seen by them.
On the contrary. No hope on resisting, because this regime is now legitimized and it receives a very, very generous economic lifeline. Not the future theoretically $300 billion, which I doubt the Iranian will ever see. And not even the $24 billion of frozen assets, which might end up in the end defrosed. But the approval, the waivers on export of oil and petrochemical component, it's a huge component. It maintains 65% out of the annual budget or the GDP of Iran. So it's a huge lifeline right now, before even starting the negotiations. So as for this regime, the number one priority of this regime was accomplished: survival, stability, and we will see what will happen from that. Moving to the second element, the nuclear, which in my personal approach, this is the most important. It's much more important than proxies and missiles, because this is a potential existential threat to Israel. Israel cannot endure Iranian nuclear, and the fact that Iran controls a network of terror that is a global network of terror, I think it's the interest of all of the rest of the world to reject that kind of future potential nuclear threat, because the combination between terror and nuclear is the worst of all threats. In that aspect, we have just vague statements relating to, if we're starting with the positive one, Iran is freezing the project from time being till pending on the future signing of the agreement. For time being, they are not allowed to dash into a bomb or exceed or enhance their project, which is a good news, because they're potentially, if in the time frame of the 60 days, if that section was not approved, they could potentially advance and create a situation that is unique, that is dangerous. They are not able, let me be very clear, they cannot build a bomb in 60 days. Far from it. The minimum span that most researchers think it's 8 months if they are dashing to a bomb with full scale, not considering any external intervention. But in the 60 days, there was a threat that they will use the ceasefire as a cover-up in order to move forward and to create new capabilities that will be renegotiated, and that way they are constantly exceeding the negotiation. That is frozen. That is apparently, if they will stick to the MoU, that's the good news. The bad news, there is a sections that clearly state that Iran has nuclear rights. Some form of a nuclear rights that will be negotiated. That is a window that they can expand to a door and to full-scale acknowledgement of the right to self-enrichment. That is enrichment on Iranian soil, which they are insisting on, which is considered to be by most of us as a potential future threat. By the way, this is exactly why Bibi Netanyahu and the rest and Trump rejected the JCPOA, the former Obama plan, because according to the Obama plan, there was a right of self-enrichment up to the level of 3.67% of enrichment of uranium, but it was there. So we don't know much, but we have some very negative, this is a very negative thing that we should discuss. Secondly, the role of the IAEA is not really clear, the supervision. So it's more holes than a cheese, as someone said about the other agreement, and very vague and very ambiguous. As for rockets, as for Hezbollah, it is not mentioned. On the contrary, in the realm of Hezbollah and Lebanon, it seems like Iran has succeeded to do a historical thing by stretching their authority on Lebanon. the fact that they insisted and received some form of recognition that the ceasefire upholds on Lebanon also and forces Israel to cease fire without Israel being even part of the negotiation, part of the MoU, reaffirms what the Iranians call the unity of the fronts and convince Lebanese and Hezbollah that they are being backed by a regional superpower of Iran that still maintains its sovereignty over it.
I would argue that this is not only dangerous and problematic for Israel, but also for the Lebanese government. That means practically for them that they no longer control their territory, and Iran would retaliate when Lebanon is being striked. But I want to move to...
I want just to emphasize that you're absolutely right, and this is contradicting the negotiation that goes in, it seems like goes on not connected in Washington between Israel and the Lebanese government. It seems right now that it's really pointless. If someone else, Iran and United States, are negotiating Lebanon, what's the point of Israel direct negotiation with this former Lebanese government, which we as an institute and I myself had lots of hope on this direct negotiation, historical direct negotiation. Now it seems like overrun by this MoU.
But I can't escape the feeling there's something we don't know about this MoU, because even two people who are staunch, opposition to this MoU now are either being silenced or supportive of it. We've heard Vice President Vance saying that the reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not briefing people against this MoU is because he knows what's included in it. We heard, or rather read, the tweet by Senator Lindsey Graham, who is a big opponent of Iran, writing that he had a meaningful conversation inside the administration and now he's convinced that this is a good move. What is the possibility of something that we're not aware of being a part of its MoU? And I'm adding to this that the language was not published for several days after signing. So is there a possibility that there is something good in this agreement that we're not aware of?
Maybe there is a side letter. Maybe there is a non-disclosed to public agreements regarding the nuclear concessions by Iranians that are for some purpose, are for time being, through the 60 days, are not disclosed with the public. Maybe. And maybe, following that logic, United States gave the Supreme Leader a victory. He got his honor, and he can stop the war with some form of a victory that he can present to his public. And maybe for that accomplishment, he paid a price beneath the table that is concealed, and we are not aware of the details. But again, we don't know. And this is just a theory, and it's parallel to the theory that it's all a ploy and we are resuming fighting. So those are two very vague, not based theories that are hovering. As for Vance and other Republican senators that backed it, it comes from a different interest, okay? As for, we all know that in the recent week, the approval of President Trump and the backing of the war diminished to a dramatic low numbers. So it was obvious that this is a toxic war that crushes the potentials of or threaten the potential victory of or achievements of the Republicans in the midterm elections, and it bad for the economy. It seems like President Trump is being dragged to a war against the American interest by Prime Minister Netanyahu, and all of the above was very toxic, very, very damaging to the Republican Party and President Trump himself. And that's why we are seeing Vance slapping Israel on the face pretending powerful, dominant, leading position, and it is important for internal American political interest and globally to retake the role of leader. As for other Lindsey Graham that you mentioned, which I really I think he's a great supporter of the state of Israel, and all through his career was a real Zionist who helped Israel dramatically. Why the change of mind? I think two reasons. He believed that economy is very crucial right now, much more crucial today than before. And secondly, the hope that we will resume and we will the ceasefire will increase the potential of expanding the Abraham Accords. Yes, it's true. There's zero chance of expanding the Abraham Accords during wartime, but I don't think that ceasefire and the MoU and the fact that Iran is so received dominance power in the Middle East, conducting direct negotiation with the United States raised its relative influence on the region. This diminishes in the long term the chances of normalization with Saudi Arabia right now. Saudi Arabia is forced back into the hedging position, and it will probably raise the Palestinian issue again as a crucial element that need to be resolved in any case of future Israel-Saudi relationship.
And like Senator Graham, you also took it to X recently, and you tweeted there that if you knew that this would be the end state of this war, it might have been better not to start it to begin with. It's a very stark statement. Can you explain why you said it?
First of all, I was talking only about the last Iranian war.
Not the one in June last year.
Not the one in June, and not generally speaking on all the war. I heard some who stretched this statement over all the war. It's restricted only to the war in Iran.
That began in February 28th.
Exactly. And the reason is that because we did not degrade Iranian capabilities to the expectations that I had in the beginning of the war, I didn't hope that the regime will collapse. Okay, I thought it might be a very positive outcome, but we can't really ensure that. But I did think that it is crucial to degrade the Iranian capability below the level that it can pose a potential threat, and the fact that that was not accomplished, and we ended up without even. I do not say we hardly touched the nuclear project. We have revived the regional proxies, and the missiles still intact. 1,700 ballistic missiles potential threat on Israel still intact, and we have a revengeful leader that will never ever forget the fact that we have killed his father, his wife, his daughter, humiliated him. After receiving that huge benefits from United States, I don't trust him at all. So in one hand, we have not really changed dramatically anything in the terms of leadership. On the contrary, IRGC, much more dominant, and the leader is owing his election to the Supreme Leader, to the IRGC. He is more radical in the nuclear aspect than his father. That combination creates something unique. And over that, the legitimization of the situation by United States that really kind of creates a rift between Israel and United States on that crucial issue of Iran, over this basic development that I've laid. If that was the outcome, it's really it's very cynical to say that in a retrospect, because I was there, and I supported the war at the beginning, but nobody knew how it will end. If that was the case, I think that we are in front of Iran in a worse situation than than the beginning of the war.
And I want to shift to Lebanon now, because we mentioned it a few times during our conversation. And Hezbollah claims that Iran told the terror organization, that it will not sign any agreement that does not necessitate that Israel stops fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon. What does this agreement, the MoU, and a future agreement mean for Israel's ability to fight Hezbollah in Lebanon? And we've seen, we just mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, 5 soldiers killed during the weekend, another one earlier this week, and we've seen rockets still targeting Israeli communities and Israeli soldiers in Lebanon. So what does it mean?
Israel should take care of its national security interest without any connection to the MoU. There are restrictions that are temporary for time being of the negotiation. Those restrictions, you can't really avoid it. President Trump clearly asked Israel to resume ceasefire, and it seems like for the past 48 hours, it seems like it's holding on. All the fragile ceasefire is maintaining. Hezbollah is not shooting, and Israel is not shooting. But we are keeping our footprint, our location. So Israel should basically think what's their interest in, what's the strategic vision regarding the northern front and Hezbollah. We need, of course, the vision should be that this disarmament of Hezbollah. We cannot really reach that through military campaign right now. So the other alternative is to force some form of a procedure, a long procedure that will involve the international community, that basically states the following. We are willing to withdraw from Lebanon in exchange for a tangible, reliable process that will ensure the security of Israel in the element that it really remove the threat of a future invasion and remove the threat of Hezbollah holding capabilities, state capabilities that can threaten Israel. That's number one. I know that it is a long process, and harnessing the international community to support the state of Lebanon and to impose that kind of demilitarization is really something that now seems to be naive, seems to be very optimistic. I know that. But that is a strategic vision that we must lay down. Otherwise, there's no point in holding that deep buffer zone. Falling back from that position, we have the other intent, other strategic intent is just to secure the border and to rebuild our communities alongside the Lebanese border. And in order to do that, you must preserve some form of forward deployment of forces, IDF forces, that will convince the civilians that are living on the fence of the Lebanon that they are secured. This sense of secure, this sense of confidence must be rebuilt. And for that reason, you need some form of adjustments along the Israeli-Lebanese border. So between those two visions or two strategic aims, one is the more ambition to create a procedure of disarming by transforming the military occupation of southern Lebanon into viable, something reliable process. That's one. And secondly, maintaining our defense needs that will ensure the rebuilding of the border. The third vision we must, unfortunately, abandon, which is a military decision that Israel forcing Hezbollah for into defeat. That is right now unachievable, restricted by the MoU, and that cannot be achieved. And for that reason, I think we should adjust the yellow line according to those two alternative strategic vision. If we are going to a transformation strategy, transforming the land for some form of procedure, that's one state of wine. I don't want to get into details, but we should be able to maintain that for a long period of time without logistics problems and operational deployment problems. And the second, if you are abandoning all of that and just maintaining the narrow defensive element, that's a totally different line. So that's where we are right now.
So building off of what you said, I really think it's in Israeli interest to have the Lebanese government disarm Hezbollah, the international community. We wouldn't have to sacrifice our soldiers fighting Hezbollah, but I'm not sure that the Israeli civilians living on the border would be okay with Israel abandoning this goal, even if it's unachievable. But I want to touch on something you said, because you referred to the strategic vision. But if we're taking it down to the tactical level, the IDF spokesperson unit released a few days ago a map showing where Israeli soldiers are situated inside Lebanon. When you look at this map, what do you see? Do you see the strategic vision that you laid down, or do you see something else?
I see a combination. It seems like it's a halfway between the military decision of Hezbollah, an attempt to achieve military decision, and create an alternative bargaining chip. Well, it seems like we are, if you are zooming in to Tibnit before the Ali Taya Ridge, where the
intense fighting
is, the whole purpose of that is what the Hezbollah calls the Southern Front. The Southern Front is a unit. It's like a combatant command, or it's a regional command, okay, in the Western standard. It's a unit of Hezbollah that holds almost 80% out of the military capabilities of Hezbollah. Previously, before the war, crushing Southern Front of Hezbollah can lead to a military decision, because you are scrapping the majority of the combating power of Hezbollah, and moving toward Nabatea, storming or trying to reach this strategic command post beneath Tibnin, where currently there are at least 40 terrorists stuck in the tunnels there in this command post. I assume that the purpose was a military decision, but we got stuck in the middle because of the ceasefire and the MoU, and that's a very not comfortable situation to be here. So I assume that in the next following days, Israel is going to withdraw tactically from that raid that we have conducted and return back to temporary lines. From there, we should decide what is the what will be the line that Israel will hold for the next few months, I think, until the next election or whatever there is a political decision to transform this into a diplomatical pathway towards maybe peace with Lebanon. I don't know. But what will be the most secured, comfortable, reliable line that we can maintain for a long period of time, and some form of withdrawal needed for the operational reasons.
So everything that has been happening in Lebanon and the MoU with Iran led to one of the most viral videos of the recent week, Vice President J.D. Vance speaking about Israel in very, very harsh words that we have not heard from almost anyone in the Republican Party in recent years, let alone the Vice President of the United States. He says that Israel can't kill its way into victory, and that Israel should not abandon the only person that support Israel, which is President Trump. And when I heard this video, something that was less discussed, but what was very worrying to me, he doesn't say you're abandoning your only ally, the United States, but your only ally, Trump, as if there's one person in the United States who still supports Israel and the other people in the administration are also not supportive of Israel anymore. When you hear Vice President Vance speaking about Israel in these terms, and taking into account what we've discussed in previous episodes of this podcast of how the security establishment has a very high regard after this war for the IDF and Israel as a whole, how do you explain this, and what does it mean for the standing of Israel in the United States in the future, and maybe even in the coming midterm elections in a few months?
First of all, let's state the obvious. Vice President Trump issued a threat a strategic threat on Israel that if not cooperating, they will be under, I don't know why. He didn't really mention it, but it seems like for some form of an embargo. I'm not daring even thinking about sanctions, but it seems like there is a threat. There is a gun on the table. Okay, that's first of all. Secondly, I would recommend that we will not label it as a personal issue. It's much more deeper. Okay, it is the stand of Israel in United States and Israel-U.S. relationship. We had the opportunity to get a glimpse of how the future looks like. And that future is very gloomy if we're not going to change our course. It's not over just a personal issue with President Trump or Vice President Vance. We are losing our political base in the United States. We have already lost the Democratic Party almost completely. We are losing the base that, according to the Dermer and the Bibi doctrine, the Republican and the evangelist will be supporter. We are losing them as well. We are becoming a homeless state in the
From bipartisan to non-partisan.
Non-partisan, which is
not in a good way.
For Israel, it's very bad. And I'm hearing this kind of we are here in the institute are constantly speaking about it and warning that it is a crucial strategic threat in the long term, and this may be those statements by President Vance may wake up or may get us into some form of action. You know, that we need that for our strategic vision. We need to change something, and I don't mean by changing something. I've heard recently to consider other capabilities or try to create a full security independence. If you are knowing the details, you know that it is impossible to achieve. No state is independent, and a small state like Israel has no chance of being fully independent in terms of developing its military capabilities and economic capabilities, etc., etc. We cannot be isolated, and we cannot divert from United States to other superpower. There's no one out there, and we have already betted all in on United States years ago. So we don't really have alternative. We can do some form of reforms. We can enhance our industrial base and our domestic manufacturing. All of that is perfectly fine, and we are doing that. But basically, the strategic level, the diplomatical, strategic, geopolitical level, the best hope is to revive and reconstitute something that is lost. How to do that? Well, we are thinking about that. It's very complicated, but I think some crucial element is acknowledging the path that we are walking into. Secondly, not surrendering or not giving it up. Find the way through the world, through the diaspora Jews, through our so vital high-tech science ecosystems, through our culture, through the fact that we are sharing really the same values of the Western Hemisphere, through our military capabilities and outstanding performance in the Middle East as the forward front of outposts of the West. All of that combined together creates some form of vitality, some form of importance for the strategic reasons for the United States, and we must enhance that, and we mustn't let go of that. It's very, very crucial to the national security of Israel.
I want to end this episode with a thought that I had while you were speaking. It seems like we're in a serious problem here because on the one hand, you're saying that Israel should change course in order to preserve its relationship with the United States. On the other hand, you're saying that Israel should protect its vital interests in the security of its citizens with almost disregard to the MoU. So if you're thinking, let's say in the short term, in the next few months to a year, what do you think is the best course that Israel can take in order to maintain both of those strategic interests, the security of its citizens and the relationship with the United States?
Basically, crucial defensive interests of Israel are not negotiable, and I think most Americans will agree about that. It is the expansion of the term of Israel national security is now being debated. We should return back to our basic values and align those very basic values of national security with the United States. I think, based on what I'm reading in the United States have already decided that Israel changed its national security concept and its vision and role in the Middle East from a small, strong, vibrant community that urges to or aspires for a peace with its neighbors based on strong position and military capability to a state that sacrifices the interest of all its neighbors and maybe even United States for the sake of its own narrow tactical ambitions driven from the trauma of October 7. And we should change that vision, and we should convince that we haven't really changed that much. And it is something that those who are criticizing us emphasizing for their own political reason in order to blacken Israel and in order to worsen its international isolation. We are still the same as we were before, a peace-aspiring nation that wants to live in its small piece of land with security to the Jews worldwide and create our own flourishing independence community. That's what we are trying to aspire, nothing else, nothing more. And I think that need to be realigned with US. And I know currently it is very fragile because of Israel internal political situation, facing an election. I don't see anyone even saying the word peace. Just mentioning the word peace can be it will bring criticize of those who are stating that, and whoever will adopt a very proactive military position will be backed because we are all working, the political aspect in Israel working on fear driven from what happened on October 7. And that atmosphere is not very positive in terms of Israel-US renewed diplomatical policy about the vision and the future.
Tamir, thank you very much. I think it was a very important note to end this conversation on. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ofir.
And thank you to our listeners and our viewers for being with us on this episode of Brief.IL. You're more than welcome to follow us on any podcast platform of your choice. And I want to thank our amazing podcast team, Ariel Nugrian, Shai Shachaf, and Omer Vixelbaum. See you next week.